Hello and welcome. Flowers have always carried meaning, and not just in beauty, but also in symbols. And during the Victorian era, flowers were a quiet way to be able to exchange messages. This was called Floriography, where each flower was ascribed a particular meaning. I think probably the most well known example is that roses typically infer love. The more I studied floriography, the more I realized that there was a connection with books. And so you've got flowers that have specific meanings that can convey specific messages. And then you can have books that are connected to those particular meanings. So today I thought I would combine books and their themes and topics and content with the Victorian floriography meaning of flowers. I'm hoping that even if maybe you're not so interested in flowers, you are looking for book recommendations. And I'm hoping that some of the book recommendations that you hear today will be new and fresh to you. So grab something warm to drink and let's settle down and learn about blooms and books. All right, I've got my trusty clipboard of notes here, and this is actually the book that I used to begin my research. There's stories in here about Elizabeth Barrett Browning and her love of posies, as well as all of these different types of flowers and what their meanings are. So this was kind of the inspiration for me to say, okay, flowers have meanings. What if I paired books with those meanings? So as we create our bouquet of books, so to speak, I'm going to kind of jump around between heavier topics and lighter topics. So the first one that we're going to start with is red poppy. The red poppy has the meaning of extravagance, and then also mourning, emotional pain, apology. Something that I learned is that you do have to be very delicate with red poppies because they do lose their petals easily, and I really think that that is part of that meaning and significance. So the first book that I am going to share for red poppy is The Shuttle by Frances Hodgson Burnett. I read this in April and have read, obviously, her children's books, and I have read one other of her adult books, but I absolutely loved The Shuttle so very much. It is very heavy. We have physical abuse in this. We have trauma, family trauma, generational trauma. We have emotional abuse in this. We have an injury that is committed that causes permanent damage to a child. So, a lot of very heavy topics in The Shuttle, but we also have hope and redemption and love and care and mercy and grace. The significance of the title is the ship that shuttles back and forth between England and the United States. In America, we have these wealthy heiresses. In England, we have these landowners and titled gentry who do not have any capital, but they have an estate and they have a title. And so they would go to the United States to find an heiress. The best example I can think of this is in Downton Abbey, kind of what happens there originally. So that was a common practice, and The Shuttle fully dives into the situation there, what was going on in history, and also the ramifications. So as we are talking about mourning and emotional pain, we have a wife who is basically she's a captive in a very awful marriage. Her son also, in some instances, is a captive. That kind of emotional pain is very much part of this book, and it manifests itself in physical appearance. The wife is she's just losing her color, literally. She's just wasting away. It's really awful. She could have been a flower that could have bloomed under a healthy marriage, but that is not what happened. We have Bettina, who is her sister, who arrives from the United States years and years later to find out what happened to her older sister. And it's through Bettina that mourning and emotional pain becomes kind of the apology and becomes the redemption and hope. The extravagance is basically that these two girls are Vanderpools and they have extensive wealth at their fingertips. At least Bettina does, because she has remained unmarried so far. So if you are looking for a book that encompasses all of that, I would recommend The Shuttle. There is an audio version of this on LibriVox that I listened to, and I thought that the reader did a fantastic job. So if you're interested in reading adult book by the author of The Secret Garden, and I haven't kind of scared you off based on like the heaviness of this, then I cannot recommend The Shuttle enough. So for the next books that I want to share for Red Poppy, I have to go grab them. The next books are 3 books in the Damarose trilogy by Elizabeth Goudge. So the first one is The Bird in the Tree. This follows the Elliot family and basically the damage that the war does to this family. So the extravagance in my mind is not so much financial as much as maybe in the setting. They have this beautiful home and this beautiful English countryside. And we have a family that really is experiencing a lot of brokenness. So for the mourning and the emotional pain, we've just got a lot of loneliness, people who have started down a path of making unhealthy decisions. We've got family members who are really disappointed in other family members, and just a lot of emotional turmoil throughout this entire series. As far as the apology part, one of the things I think that Elizabeth Goudge is so skilled at is writing about people. It's basically broken people finding peace and redemption. So her characters are very flawed. They can make decisions that you just really can't understand. But there is always this theme of hope and redemption and this idea of apology. So these characters in this family have to go through a process of really seeking forgiveness and atoning for some of the decisions that they have made. So I think this Damarose trilogy is a great place to kind of get that full meaning of the red poppy. You do want to read it in order, and so you'll want to start with The Bird in the Tree. Not every flower in our bouquet is going to have multiple books being recommended for it, so this next one is an example of that. Violets mean modesty, unseen virtue, and quiet love. So what I wanted to recommend today is a book that is a very quiet book, but has a very powerful message. And again, one that I just really do feel like ended with hope and redemption. So this is, one of those literary gems. This is Marilynne Robinson's Gilead. This is a winner of the Pulitzer Prize. I have read another one of Marilynne Robinson's books and did not enjoy it to the level that I enjoyed Gilead. So this novel, the entire novel, is a letter from an aging pastor, a minister, to his son. He's reached a time in his life where he has a great level of self-awareness, and he shares parts of his life from his childhood. There's specific memories that he shares with his dad that I can just close my eyes and visualize as we experience it with him as he's sharing it. There is a lot of pain in here and miscommunication as well. This minister's observations and viewpoints very much is this sort of finding holiness in ordinary moments. So if you're interested in a story that is quiet and modest, but has a very powerful message, I would suggest picking up Gilead. Next, we've got Hollyhock. Hollyhock is female ambition. And I don't think that you can adequately talk about female ambition and books without recommending William Thackeray's Vanity Fair. First of all, it's a chunker. Second of all, it's not the easiest one to kind of get into. There's a lot of characters, there's a lot of moving parts, but once you get into it and you see Becky, she is just sassy and vivacious. She is leaving school with a friend of hers. She's supposed to be moving into a governess position because she has kind of this questionable background. She's obviously not like going to be a washerwoman, but she's also not gentry. And so she's going to need to work for her living. But her goal in life is to exceed social expectations. She is the epitome of a social climber. And for her, it seems like that is going to be through a profitable marriage. But she is just so ornery and really does seem willing to do whatever it takes to be able to have money at her disposal and to have ins into social situations. All right. Next, we have Pansy, which in French is pensée, which sounds a lot like pensive, right? So the meaning behind the pansy is thoughts. So when I looked this up, I immediately knew which book I would have to recommend for this part of our bouquet. And that meaning is books about love and idleness, love potion, 3 colors in one, helping to ensnare your sweetheart. This is the book that I have to recommend, which is The Alchemy of Flowers by Laura Rousseau. I had the pleasure of meeting Laura when she was launching this book into the world. This is her adult debut. In this, we have Eloise. She is basically fleeing from a traumatizing relationship. She also, as just kind of a content warning, she also struggles with infertility and really is in a place where she is trying to accept the fact that she's not going to be able to bear children. She is experiencing loss in that, as well as loss in her relationship. As a result of that pain, she has answered an ad for the Le Château de Paris, where she is going to be a gardener, basically, at this beautiful estate that has, all of these greenhouses and also outdoor flower bed areas. She has accepted this job, not only in the fact of it being like this, beautiful location and outdoor work, but also because there are stipulations that say no children on the premises and also kind of limited cell technology when you are working there. It's like part of the agreement. The goal here is that she is experiencing healing. I don't want to go too much into the 3 colors in one. That connection, I immediately was like, oh, that's perfect for this book. And also Love Potion. Also, when Eloise gets there, the tree house basically that she lives in. I love the little dwellings that Laura Rousseau has created in this book. I would love to live in any one of them. But anyway, the tree house that Eloise lives in was formerly occupied by an apothecarian type person. And so there's all these different teas that are labeled and herbs and, little potions that are all throughout the shelves in the house. And so I think that is also a great connection there. And then, of course, ensnaring your sweetheart, love and idleness, just so many connections that I think make this just such a great option. So there's a little bit of intrigue, mystery. There's a little bit, I think, of psychological thriller where you're like, there is something crazy going on here that I do not understand. So just be aware it is adult. There is some adult content, a little bit of, what I would consider like, it's not explicit, but there is romance in here, so just be aware of that. But if you want to go on a ride where it absolutely connects with thoughts and pensée with the French word of being in France and the 3-in-1 nature of the pansy's appearance. Then pick up The Alchemy of Flowers by Laura Rousseau. All right, next we have a daisy. Daisy is like what you would imagine: innocence, simplicity, honesty, pure, and childlike sincerity. And the book that I chose for Daisy is Daddy Longlegs. This is by Jean Webster. This is the story of Judy, who is attending college based on a benefactor who is supporting her financially. She must write to her benefactor every month, and she can't know who he is, and so she calls him Daddy Longlegs. So we've got, it's all written in these like letter formats, so an epistolary novel. And I just think Daddy Longlegs pairs so well with Daisy and the innocence of the main character, Judy. She just very much has this childlike, simplistic personality. She, I think, really takes things for face value. I think you can kind of tell as you're going through who the benefactor actually is, but Judy is completely unawares. And in the beginning, she's childlike because she is so young. And then she kind of gets through this phase as you get to the end of the book where she's like kind of like this butterfly who's come out of its chrysalis and is blooming and trying to figure the world out. And I think she makes a couple missteps. But I do think that innocence is so well captured in this for Daisy. I also think that daisies are kind of not only like bright, but also an old-fashioned type flower. You know, you've got the he loves me not. It just feels very old-fashioned, and I think this book feels old-fashioned. If you're looking for an epistolary novel, you know, I think that does help with kind of moving through because you're just reading letters, but one that feels wholesome and old-fashioned and innocent, then try Daddy Longlegs by Jean Webster. Okay, next I have Lavender. Lavender is distrust, emotional restraint, and symbolic distance. So I thought long and hard about which book that I would want to choose. I figured for that distrust that I would want to choose a mystery, and one that I think fits really well is Susan Wittig Albert's The Tale at Hilltop Farm. This is inspired by Beatrice Potter's life. So this is in the time period of her life when she decides to leave kind of the umbrella of her family and to move out into the country, and she purchases this old farm estate kind of right out from underneath the villagers' noses, at least kind of how it's portrayed in this book. But when she arrives to her new estate, there has been a murder in the village. And this is just such a cute little story. It actually, if you like animals, we kind of get the perspective of the animals where we understand their thoughts and they're able to communicate with each other, and we know that. Now, it's not like the full part of it, it's just little pieces, but I do love that aspect because of the way that Beatrix Potter anthropomorphized her animals and kind of had them be able to communicate. I thought that was a cute little touch that Susan Wittig Albert did. The other thing that I love about this is that it is set in the Lake District, which I hope to visit someday. I would love to. And part of the reason why I thought of this as far as distrust and emotional restraint is because there are a lot of examples of that, not only in the village people from, you know, this person who bought this farm who isn't from here. They have a lot of distrust, but Beatrix Potter herself was experiencing some emotional restraint as far as her relationships that she had with people. There's also restraint in this as far as how the mystery unfolds. It's not really feeling so much like a thriller where you're psychologically not sure what's going on. You just kind of methodically move through the process of figuring out what is going on. The other thing to note is this is the first book in a series. I do absolutely want to continue the series, but I have not yet. I actually don't see these out in used bookstores very much, so that might be part of it, is I need to like actively go and search on thrift books, but I would love to continue this series. Okay, the next few, we're going to go back to the heavier books in the bouquet. So the next flower that I am choosing, it's not technically a flower, I don't think, is rosemary. Rosemary has a significance of meaning remembrance, memory of the dead, fidelity in memory. My notes say it is one of the most consistent and strongly agreed upon meanings in 19th century flower language. So rosemary is absolutely memory based. There's a well-known Shakespeare line that reinforces this, which is, there's rosemary, that's for remembrance. So that really kind of helped to like cement its meaning. So I've got two books to kind of settle into like this solemn, reflective books that involve memory. So the first one to share, I just grabbed The Buried Giant, but I really think any Kazuo Ishiguro books deal with memory, I'm realizing. So The Buried Giant is like this fever dream of a Arthurian inspired tale. I read this with a friend of mine, Dina, and I was not 100% sure if what we were reading was like actually happening or if somebody was like dreaming it. It's an interesting ride. But then Never Let Me Go is, I think, one of his more famous works. There's a movie about that. I also read that. And then also Remains of the Day, which might be the most famous because it's the movie with Anthony Hopkins. But all three of those books deal with memory and how you are remembering things. I think that is a big theme in any of his books. But I do think The Buried Giant is probably the most extreme example of a book about memories and remembrances. But then another book to share that I think is a good fit, and I hope to share more about this book in subsequent videos as well, because I don't hear a lot about it. But this is Hope Miraley's Blood in the Mist. This is a pre-Tolkien fantasy novel. It's not dealing with world building where we're in a different place. This is set here in our environment, but we also have this like doorway into the Fae world. So on the back it says, Blood in the Mist is a prosperous country town situated where two rivers meet, the Dal and the Dapple. The Dapple springs from the land of Fairy and is a great trial to Lud, which rejects anything other, preferring to believe only in what is known and what is solid. And then we have our main character, who's Nathaniel Chanticleer. He's dreamy, he's melancholic, he's like just sort of nostalgically thinking about his youth, and yet he is denying the remembrance of something that happened to him when he was young. There's a blurb on the back that says, a Shakespearean tragic comedy, a murder mystery, and a multifaceted allegory all in one. The thing that I love about this is that it is a pre-Tolkien. So a lot of our modern notions of what makes a book a fantasy novel is not necessarily a part of this. It does feel very much like a more modern Phantastes by George MacDonald. And it just has that, I don't know, classic feel to it. So another one that is really heavy, I don't know, it might even be heavier than any of the ones that I have shared yet today. This goes with the flower marigold. So marigold, it means grief and mourning and loss, as well as celebration of life. So it's like surviving a hardship. And the book that I have to share is not one that I don't think I've mentioned on BookTube. I don't think, maybe a long time ago, is As Long as the Lemon Trees Grow. This is by Zulfa Kato. This is the story of people who are living in Syria during the war. So these are specific families and characters who are dealing with the Syrian war and its effects. It is quite traumatic because our main character works in a hospital. We definitely see physical results from the war. So, uh, there's discussions about specific wounds in specific parts of bodies and kind of how that's treated, what it's like to be in the hospital when they don't have the medicine that they need. Along with our character, Salama Kasaf, we experience and witness war trauma. So it's very difficult to read. It definitely gets through that grief and mourning of loss of the marigold. We also, with Salama, see her manifestation of PTSD and dealing with war in this imaginary character that is really around her all the time, and that is Kof. Kof is the guy who kind of urges her along, gets her to do things. It's like her inner part of herself that's kind of helping her get through day to day, but he really is not kind. We just really can sense the pain that she's going through. This is a YA novel, so just be aware of that. I think there's a little bit of lower level of maturity on the part of this character simply because she is younger, but the situational war does definitely cause her to have to grow up quickly. We do experience loss with her. We see what it's like for people who are trying to get out of the country. And even in Salama's case, where she knows that she should leave, I think Kof wants her to leave, but she's really struggling with leaving the family that she has behind and leaving the friends that she has behind. There is a very sweet, wholesome romance in this as well, which I really liked, kind of the wholesomeness of that part. Sometimes in YA, we get into open door romance, which I personally feel is absurd for YA. And so in this, we don't have to worry about that. It's very chaste. If you're looking for kind of that heavier marigold part of our bouquet, then I would suggest checking out As Long as the Lemon Trees Grow. Next, I am doing Bluebells. This is Constancy. So this is the hardiest wildflowers, but do not do well once picked. So I know that we have Virginia bluebells where we live. They're so beautiful. They're also very picky about where they grow. But we've seen where somebody has picked them and they're just on the ground and they're so wilted. For bluebells, I chose Thornyhold by Mary Stewart. It's not my favorite Mary Stewart, but it is very high up there. Sometimes I wonder if it's because it's the first one of its kind by her that I read. But then I'm like, no, it's really that good. So this also is a really great autumnal read, but I think it is perfect for this bluebell idea because we've got Gilly, who through her childhood, she met her mother's cousin. I don't think there was a lot of involvement after that until she discovers that she has inherited a cottage from her mother's cousin. And Gilly decides to go. And there's all kinds of these kind of mysterious things that are happening. We've got a little bit of romance in there. We've got neighbors who do not wish the best for her. And Gilly really is, I think, picky about where she blossoms. And I also think that in situations where she's not in her best environment, she definitely kind of wilts. So some of the other words used to describe the meaning of bluebells is gratitude, constancy, humble beauty, woodland enchantment, or thin place. We have those like in between places where our world and the Fey world kind of get mixed layering. That's what bluebells can signify. And I think Thornyhold is that. This cottage definitely feels like this enchanted woodland setting where there are strange things happening that do kind of feel like an unusual setting. And Gilly, I think, really thrives in it. So I don't want to give too much away because I do think going into this kind of more than what I've said, not really knowing really what actually is going on, it helps with that kind of suspenseful nature that Mary Stuart kind of leans into. So hopefully that sounds intriguing to you. And if you haven't read Thornyhold, you pick this up. Do not topple stack. Okay, lastly, we are going to talk about lilies. So lily means purity, innocence, spiritual and moral beauty. So the emotional tone is gentle, moral, idealized, and spiritually elevated. And what I want to recommend is Flower Fables by Louisa May Alcott. So these, I believe, were little short stories that she wrote when she was young, a teenager. Obviously, they got published when she became a more famous author. This was a copy that we got at the Orchard House, which is where the Alcotts lived. I was fortunate enough to visit that and to see the room that she wrote in. The pillow on the couch, if you don't know, she had a pillow, and if she was in a mood where she wanted to be left alone, the pillow would be turned a certain way. But then if she was open and receptive to talking to people, then the pillow would be another way. Just I love her personality so much. Anyway, these are very fantastic tales. We've got little flowers that are part of this. We have Lily Bell, for instance, and Thistledown. Let me see if I can find some of these lovely pictures. So you can see they're like little anthropomorphized flowers. And so this idea of morally idealized is this. There's a lot of moralization in this, of right and wrong decisions. We also have a connection with purity because, again, as this is written by Louisa May Alcott in her childhood, they're just very pure, innocent stories. I love that she's anthropomorphized flowers, and the flowers all have personalities based on kind of their physical manifestation of drooping or being upright or losing petals or turning into themselves at certain times of the year. So Louisa May Alcott just really did her childhood honorably with her nature knowledge, and it's very much evident in this novel. So if you haven't had a chance to read Flower Fables by Louisa May Alcott, I think it's just fantastic. They're like little short stories. Some of them are longer than others, but they're just little stories that you can just kind of like nibble on and get through at whatever pace you are comfortable. So those are my books that I would have in a Floriography bouquet of flowers that have significance and meaning. If you've made it this far, I would love to recommend a book to you based on your favorite flower. So kind of taking that Floriography feel and applying that to a book that, you know, maybe you could try based on your preferences. So if you leave down below in the comments your favorite flower, then I will see if I can find a book to match that maybe you haven't read yet, just based on the significance and meaning of that flower. So be sure to do that. I would love to be able to share this experience with you of building your own bouquet of books based on your preferences. So as always, thanks so much for watching, and until next time.